I am going to beat you into the living death.
Welcome to another edition of the Living Death Show. Do not adjust your screens, your TVs, your phones, your tablets, whatever you happen to be watching this on. I am not Ant Walker with a serious contrast problem on his camera. I am, of course, Ben Duffy. Ant is indisposed today, taking care of family. The inmates are running the asylum. We didn't want to have an empty chair, so always a treat to have our friend, the homie, Matt Hawkins, co-host of the Coast to Coast Combat Hour and HBO Combat Sports superfan with us. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing outstanding. Appreciate coming on again, and got to see some great action over the weekend that get to talk about here. So no two people I'd rather speak with. Well, I shouldn't say that. That'd be bullshitting. But but I do appreciate the time, gentlemen.
Yeah. Yeah, like this is me, like Dana White sitting with Ben Askren next to him it was Michael Chandler next to him, like, you know, cage side, just kind of pointing to him and being like, "He's ours now, baby." That's right. And of course, with us as well is the one that Ant refers to as the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, the knowledge. It is Sherdog Associate Editor Jay Petrie. Jay, I talk to you every single day, it seems like. Not a bad thing. How are you doing today?
I am feeling it. Like, this weekend was a combat sports weekend. Like, this was every major promotion seemed to be throwing something at us in some fashion, and also BKFC. We'll talk about that later. It's these weekends are always interesting because they're exhausting, but they're exhilarating when there's so much to go through that I feel like my introduction is actually taking valuable time that we should be talking about these fights. Like, for instance, the fact that Mackenzie Dern, who came up short in her 5-round fight against Yan Xiaonan at the UFC, landed 2 takedowns, which actually was a personal best for her in the UFC, which is kind of entertaining in itself. To lift her takedown accuracy rate to 11%. So 11 is my stat of the week. That Mackenzie Dern officially lands 11% of her takedowns in the UFC, which is even Damian Myers like, dang, bro.
I was going to ask what his percentage is. I had to sit through the Woodley fight, and God, I sat through a few of those in person.
The number that pops out to me, he went 0 for 47 across those 3 fights, wasn't it?
Something, yeah. It was absolutely
Woodley,
historic.
Usman, and Covington. It was like 0 for 47, something like that. Oh, that hurts so
24%. So,
but that's overall.
Yes, career-wise.
Right. Whew. Well, we have plenty to talk about today. Certainly a packed weekend in mixed martial arts, but we do need to start first on something of a somber note, although not too somber. Antonio Inoki passed away on October 1st at the age of 79. To do him justice by way of a biography would take the full 60 to 75 minutes we have for this podcast, so we won't be doing that. But suffice it to say, he is a legend in the world of pro wrestling as the founder of New Japan Pro Wrestling, a pioneer in mixed martial arts, not only as the founder of Inoki Genome Federation and the famous year-ending Inoki Bombaye festivals, but as arguably a participant in the first truly famous mixed rules bout ever, you know, when he took on Muhammad Ali. Passed away at 79. All those sports and entertainment bona fides on top of him having been a past member of Japan's House of Councilors, which is their upper legislative body, equating roughly to the United States Senate. Truly a man who kind of did it all. Renaissance man, entertainer, legend. Any thoughts about Antonio Inoki from either of you? Matt, got anything?
Yeah, well, so I don't have anything personally other than, you know, seeing him at the old Pride events, seeing the dude with the big jaw, slapping people around, and then reading, you know, you had heard about him and Ali. I knew about that just from folklore almost growing up, you know, in the 80s and 90s. You just kind of heard about it. You heard about how bad it was, and it was like not even worth wasting your time to explore that if in a WWF world where everything was scripted and you very rarely was extremely boring. So there was that, but a story. I reached out to Mark Hall, who old school fans will know fought in 5 of the first 11 UFCs. Came out the gate 4 and 5. I think he was 5-4 at one point with 3 losses to Don Fry. So we can thank the matchmakers for kind of throwing his career off early. But he was a good friend of mine, still is. And I reached out to him because he actually worked with Antonio Inoki in the late 90s when Ogawa became more of a thing. He started wrestling, fighting, and he was looking to start up an organization called UFO, the Universal Fighting Organization. At that time, it was about 50-50. There was some fights, there was some pro wrestling, there was some mixes of the two. This is about when I was kind of in the gym around Mark. He actually, I don't know, make anybody think I was a fighter, but I was asked if I was interested in going to Japan and doing something like this. I was 17, 18. All I could think about was a stretcher getting carried out the back alley, blood sport, kickboxer style. So anyways, Mark ends up working with Inoki, and he becomes, he's like the coach of the U.S. UFO team. Inoki actually leases out a building here in Temecula, California, for gyms for Mark, and Mark is the instructor of the U.S. team. At the time, there was a Japanese team, I think a European team, and Mark Hall was the captain of the team. Inoki actually flew out here. In Mark's book, there's some cool pictures of him sitting at local restaurants out here, actually with Ogawa at the table too, which is kind of cool. Some really old school photos that I posted on the MMA community.com if anybody wants to check out the thread on Inoki there. So Mark had a relationship with him, and he always told me how he really personified the respectful part of martial arts and business that you dealt with at that time in Japan, that was different than the corrupt, behind the scenes Wild West here in the United States, especially at that time. Getting money, getting paid, managers stabbing you in the back left and right. He loved going to Japan. He loved dealing with them because they handed you an envelope of money, and what you expected to be in that envelope for him was always in that envelope. So I reached out to Mark. He's not big on social media, not big on any stuff like that. So I thought that he might not end up being aware of the passing of his friend. So I sent him a text, just said, "Hey man, thinking about your brother. Wanted to let you know, Mr. Inoki passed away, and I thought you'd be interested in knowing." So he responded. I'm going to pass through some of the friendly stuff. He says, basically, I wouldn't have known about the passing without you. Appreciate you sharing my pictures online. Brings back great memories. He says, I was watching Mr. Inoki pro wrestle when I was 5 years old on our old black and white television when we only got 5 channels. He helped teach the Von Erichs and Hulk Hogan how to wrestle. He fought Muhammad Ali in a boxing versus mixed martial arts match back in the 70s. What a full life he lived, and what a great legacy he left behind. So it's not so tragic that he's gone, but his life needs to be celebrated as the great man that he was, of great character. I really liked him. We got along great. I'm sure at his funeral he will be surrounded by all the population of Japan that will be celebrating him, much like the recent passing of Queen Elizabeth. And he just basically goes on to say he was a great man and thanks for letting him know. So that's something from one of the great pioneers, from a guy who he worked with and who obviously influenced a guy who when the sport popped and it was bare knuckle headbutts and stuff, jumped into it and decided to get into it. He also made his name at UFC 9 by beating Koji Katao, which set him up as a bit of Mark Hall, set him up as a bit of a, he would talk about how he goes there and he'd see himself on magazine covers as like the giant killer and stuff, the Godzilla killer. And that would always throw him off. And that's what made him love Japan and helped him with his relationship with Inoki. So again, not so much my personal side, but I feel I throw a little shout out to the Cobra Mark Hall and then his words about the great Antonio Inoki.
Oh, we definitely appreciate Mark's words, and we appreciate you sharing them with us here. Anything to add to that, Jay?
I feel like I should have gone first, so I didn't have to follow that. It should have been like, hey, me first. There's a couple things that really stick in my mind. When I was younger, in the early days of the early days, I did enjoy the pro wrestling stuff. I did enjoy WWF and WCW. So we're dating. I'm dating myself there. So I feel like I recall watching Inoki wrestle Ric Flair in '95, but I don't know if that's accurate, if that's just something I saw later. But there is something I do remember seeing it live, because I had many friends that carried on to enjoy pro wrestling and still do to this day, that somehow in 2000, I was able to see Inoki Bombaye, where there was a very pivotal moment that happened during the broadcast. And you probably have seen the clip. I think it was Bixen Span reshared it to remind people, where every competitor and every official, and it was, I don't think it was fans, it was everybody who was participating, lined up to walk in the ring to get slapped by Inoki. And just the reverence that they showed him, the love. I want people to feel like that towards me. You know, I don't have to slap them, but just that absolute honor and reverence and whatever you want to call it, it was special. And Inoki was a real special guy. I studied him and followed him for a long time. And, you know, it's weird to think about the Ali match, because now that it's coming back up again, I hope that Josh Gross gets more publicity towards his book, because what a book. Oh my gosh, what a read. If you haven't read that, then give it a shot.
I will drop a link in the description of this episode, so that anybody who wishes to seek it out, it is available on Amazon. I believe it's available as an ebook as well as a paper book.
I believe so.
And it's absolutely worth the read.
Yeah. Now, Ben, what about you, man?
I have nothing to add to yours. I mean, I knew of him as a professional wrestler, but even being, a tick older than both of you guys, I was out of pro wrestling fandom around the same time that he was out as an active pro wrestler. I knew him much more as a pioneering figure in Japanese MMA, and kind of like you mentioned, the night of the slaps, just as this revered, almost grandfatherly, uncle-ish icon who, was at his events. And, it wasn't any of the sometimes a little bit performative, like Japanese respect towards like the Godfather type figure, but just seemed to be genuinely beloved. And then, to realize how many other things he went on to do, I think Mark Hall's comparison of him to Queen Elizabeth doesn't even do him justice, because he did a fucking lot more than Queen Elizabeth did. And he didn't wake up in the morning and have it handed to him. Like, he did, aside from the advantage of being like 6'3" in Japan, and the doors that opens for you, even if you have to duck your head to get through them, everything he did was just through his own hustle. And through a reputation for honorable dealing in an industry that even in Japan, in some cases, especially in Japan, didn't always end up that way. And part of Japan's complicated legacy of professional wrestling and actual fighting being intertwined. They have a relationship in the West. It's not the same as the relationship in Japan, and as kind of complicated and fraught as that was, especially in the 90s. He was there for it, and he was there when it became more of a defined separation and had two separate arms of the thing going on. That's an important figure. He'll be missed, like I said off the top, and fortunately for me, Mark Hall sort of seemed to confirm in his text to Matt, it's not too somber or tragic. I mean, he's a guy who lived a long and full life and accomplished more than a lot of people, almost anybody in the same halls that he walked, can claim to have done. So it's a time to remember and respect, but not shed too many tears.
And if you haven't seen, especially Bill Burr's treatment of the match between Antonio Inoki and the great Antonio, just do. It will bring you to tears if you have not seen, especially Bill Burr's commentary. Just a special wrestling / not so much. It's like it's a beautiful example when keeping it real goes wrong. That's all I have to say.
There you go. I mean, moving on to the fights that actually took place this past week and this past weekend. Before we get into the actual fights, there is one more thing we need to talk about, because UFC Fight Night 211, Dern versus Yan, also known as UFC Vegas 61, was noteworthy, newsworthy, and controversial well beyond the actual drawing power of its card for reasons completely unrelated to the fighters. It was, of course, front page news. Everybody should know by now, but the UFC just, about 3 days out from the event, announced that it would be closed to the public as well as to the media. I mean, being closed to the public, we're talking about an event that took place in the UFC Apex. For the first at least year of COVID, it was essentially closed to the public anyway, but once they opened it up, it had just a bare handful of seats. But media had access basically right from the beginning. There was no media access here. Rumors flew in the days leading up to the fights, what this was about. It was quickly rumored that Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, and now, Meta and the metaverse, had something to do with it. People were saying, did he buy the UFC? Is the UFC going to put this card, in the metaverse on like VR headsets? The rumor mill ran wild in the days leading up to it. Dana White, tried to debunk those rumors, tried to say maybe there's something interesting in store. All that appeared to be in store for us was a private viewing party for Mark Zuckerberg and some really kind of awkward, to the point of embarrassing, Getty images from the UFC's in-house photographers showing him standing up and doing his best impression of a human.
While his wife is sitting there terrified going,
yeah. I mean, I will open up the floor for discussion. What do you make of this? Does it mean anything? Does it mean anything bad? Is there still more for us to find out about this? Is it a one-off thing? Thoughts, either of you?
No, it's not. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think he did everybody a favor by not allowing fans to spend $1,500 on a shitty-ass card like that. And if Zuckerberg wants to drop 180,000 or whatever the heck, or 200 or 500,000 for that crappy card, it makes me feel better for the money I've spent to go to some of the events. But yeah, I mean,
allow me to jump in here, in case I didn't lay out Matt's credentials sufficiently in advance. He has been to more mixed martial arts events and more UFC events specifically than anybody.
Yeah, 60 UFC events, 225 plus combat events in the last 20 plus years. But yeah, so I've only been comped UFC tickets one time. So 59 of the times I purchased my seat, anywhere from 2 to about 14 tickets for groups of people. So I have a lot of experience buying tickets and stuff, and taking people to the fights, and I've seen my share of history, so I don't complain about the money I've spent. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's not a surprise to me the UFC wants to become buddy-buddy with as many billionaires as possible. It's not the same UFC that it was before. It's a billionaire UFC now. It's not the Fertitta. Not that the Fertittas aren't billionaires, but they acted more common man, especially while they were trying to build the sport. There is no common man now. Now, to go to a UFC event, you have to, if you have a normal family with kids and stuff, I can't imagine. It must be almost impossible. I don't have kids. I don't have a wife, so a lot of times I don't have a bunch of money. I'm not looking to take a group of 4 to the fights, at least all on my own dime. I can't even imagine, it's the price of everything going up, but the UFC has just become so expensive. The idea of sitting 100 yards away from the cage and it costing you that, that much money is just wild to me nowadays.
I mean, would it be fair to say that it has, if you did have a family or a group of friends, it has more the feeling of a once-a-year trip to Disneyland than going to a basketball team 10 times in a season?
That's exactly what it is. But even then, Disneyland we're talking about, so let's say $200 for a park hopper ticket with all the extra bells and whistles they got going. Let's say even $250. I mean, if you're most of the time you're not going to be able to take your kids and sit up in the nosebleeds at a UFC and keep them entertained. To get in the lower bowl of a UFC event nowadays in Vegas,
Matt, the rest of us have to fly there and stay. We don't live in California.
Well, but I've been to New York too. So like just the New York prices in general. So I went to UFC. I went to UFC 205, the first one legal there. It cost me. I already had everything booked, so I was behind the 8 ball. It cost me. And I even saying this, the most I've ever spent on a ticket in my life, $550 to get in the door at MSG. I already had hotel flights booked, so there was it was my first time ever in New York. It was going to happen. I went there for UFC 230, fell on my 40th birthday. First time a UFC event ever fell on my birthday in the history of the sport. So I said, okay, I'm going to go to New York. Had a big group go out there. That was Cormier and Lewis. Prices. You could have got in the arena for $130. This next event coming up here in November, the upper level right now is selling for about $6. You know, so we're back to the 205 McGregor card for Pereira and Adesanya, and I'm sorry, but that is not Eddie Alvarez and Conor McGregor to me. It doesn't have 2 other titles. It doesn't have Joanna, doesn't have Woodley, doesn't have Wonderboy. Like, I know there's some good fights on there. Chandler, Poirier, love the guys. $600 nosebleed to get into MSG when they've had half a dozen events there now, and people coming off of COVID, coming off of all this crap. Yeah. It seems extreme to me that they've made it a 1%er event, and turned the back on a lot of people, a lot of blue collar people that busted ass to support the sport when nobody else was, you know, and a lot of those people can't afford to go anymore.
That's kind of what I was mumbling towards when you open the segment up, because it's a blanket. This is not the end of the story. This is not a one-off deal. This is not a short-term situation. You know, this isn't we're increasing the price of the pay-per-view for this one event and then bringing it back down again. No, this is the price of the tickets rise, and this is what it is. That's how it's going to stay. Zuckerberg taking over the apex, I fear, is not a one-off situation. It was too easy. I mean, this is going to sound very harsh, and I'm going to say it like this on purpose, but it was way too easy for the UFC to get away with it. Granted, I as an attorney, I've looked at some of the statutory language and regulations that the states have in California and Nevada and a couple others about attendance and coverage and admission. So the UFC is within its rights to do what it did now, and that's kind of cool for them, but it kind of makes the rest of us go, wait a second. So now you're specifically able to exclude anybody at the drop of a hat. If we wanted to name a fight card like we are going to end up naming UFC 280, obviously UFC Fight Night 211 is called Lionheart, because all I can picture is fighting in front of a parking lot with the high beams on, just the rich people surrounding the circle as people go, Leon and Van Damme punches a guy, and then he fights somebody like a surfer in an empty swimming pool, and then he fights. Yeah, so it's
call a card that the same week that Jillian DeCourcy leaped into the atomweight top 5.
It's kind of why it's the week of the Lionheart. I'll give it the week of the Lionheart, but it concerns me as a member of the media, not just as a fight fan, how easy and simple and okay, I guess that's how it's going to be that the UFC can do, because this is something that now can easily be emulated by any other organization, seeing that now they have precedent, I guess is a good way to say it, to be able to just stage shows and do what they want. Now we know Combat Global has that whole situation going. They're still not, I don't think they're selling tickets to their shows yet. And I mean, we'll leave that for
insert punchline here.
Yeah, we'll leave that whole mess for another day. But it just, what happened to running towards regulation? What happened towards running towards transparency? My concern of the shift to, as you both mentioned, of almost corporatizing, almost 1%ertizing, if that's a term I just made up, but excluding the rest of the public and other people. to reach some sort of demographic that doesn't really exist other than in very small pockets. It's it just makes me think of what Dana said. I think it was this week, but it might have been last week. He said, "I'm not going anywhere, but when I do, the UFC as you know it will be vastly different." And that's right, because it'll probably be run like a corporation instead of like a whatever the kind of a despotism I guess we have going right now. So it's I fear that things are going to get weirder, and I guess we're just along for the ride.
One quick thing is, you know, they pulled it off. So they announced this, like you said, went Tuesday-ish, so right in the middle of the week. Were tickets not on sale to the public? I'd be curious to know how many. Were they never on sale to the public? Or did they sell them? Or did they sell them and then tell those people to go jump in a lake?
That's the question.
That would have me interested, because then you start getting into, you know, you talk about being a lawyer and stuff. I might be going, wait a minute here. I mean, could Zuckerberg
pull the rug?
We talk about what's the record gate for MSG, like 17 million, somewhere in that neighborhood, give or take. I mean, that's nothing. That's an ice cream cone at McDonald's for him. He literally, could he call the UFC and tell them that UFC 2 next pay-per-view in MSG, send everybody their tickets back. Here's $20 million. I want the arena myself. I mean, is that? Oh, it seems to me like that's fair game at this point. If Elon Musk calls him, if Donald Trump, if anybody calls him and decides they want to buy the arena out, can we just tell average person, hey, sorry you made plans, sorry you booked flights, sorry you got hotel rooms, sorry you came for fight week, but you know, enjoy yourself. Could they buy the expo?
It's certainly an interesting business model. I mean, it reminds me of the old Calvin and Hobbes comic strip where Calvin opens up a lemonade stand, and I forget the exact number, but it's like lemonade $1,000, and Hobbes is like, "What the fuck?" And he's like, "Oh, I only have to sell one."
Yeah. Just have to sell one very expensive seat to a very high ticket buyer. Yeah, I can see that, and that's the thing. Like, we had a sitting U.S. president attend a UFC card not terribly long ago who happens to be made of money. I'm just saying that buckle up, buckaroos.
Yeah, I mean, not much to say other than that. Aside from, there are two different things going on here. The exclusion of the public is a weird business decision, and it remains to be seen whether it's a sustainable or tenable one. The decision to exclude the media is another thing entirely. And it's the sort of thing that, frankly, I thought only happened in Singapore. Like the high-handedness, the ability to exclude independent press from covering an event that is sanctioned by a governmental organization, like the Nevada Athletic Commission. Those are appointed public servants. You know, they're the DMV. They're an arm of the government. That's more problematic to me, because excluding independent observers from the actual night of the fights, from things like weigh-ins, just there is the possibility for shenanigans to happen.
Yeah.
And something I've said for a long time in Dana White's defense is, you always know how he feels about things like regulation-wise. He'll go off in the post-fight presser about a judge's decision or a referee's mistake that he disagrees with. But at least he doesn't have just peremptory power to change those things. And it's because the UFC works generally it works in regulated areas, and on the rare occasions that it doesn't, there is intense scrutiny, and it's from presence of independent media that are not in the employ of the UFC or their broadcast partners that have a vested interest in like the show going on and looking proper. Like, we can be headed for like one championship type situations, or just truly Bush League stuff, like the stuff that bombards Jay from Russia and the CIS on a weekly basis. Like, I don't think I'm yelling that the sky is falling by saying that it is important to have media there.
I agree with you, except, and I say this as somebody who doesn't really consider themselves media. I know I do a podcast, but I'm a fan. I don't. So my biases and stuff, I'm open about who I cheer for. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything here. UFC, some really good people there have done some cool stuff for me. So I hate bashing them general because I feel like they might get taken by them and see it as maybe a personal attack. The media, I feel like the media they have at the UFC events is already kind of in their pocket. So I don't know if now there's some guys who will write some negative stuff, but they're not around very much. They're not getting to those events very often. It seems to me you see the questions asked, how's the investigation going on that brawl, by the way? Didn't we hear that there was an investigation going on? I mean, we find out who does we're never going to find that out. We'll find out who bombed that pipeline before we find out how a fight started in the backstage. I don't think it's great to have the media there, obviously, but I don't know if I trust most of the UFC media, maybe not the MMA media in general. But a lot of the UFC media is just going to tell them what they want to put it. They're going to type what they're told to put out anyway. And I maybe that's me being crazy, but that's the way I've always seen it. Is I don't. So we need to have media there because you got to have transparency. One event I don't think throws that into too much chaos. If it happens again, then all of a sudden, set off the fire alarms and the sprinklers because the house is on fire at that point. We don't need to even, the UFC at that point becomes Russia, platform Russia, where Putin's, renting out the arena. I mean, I've seen that, in Russia. So if I don't know. I just the MMA media in general. I don't know if it really does a whole lot as far as the damaging their reputation because I don't think anybody's going to write anything bad about it. I was at Bellator. We'll get to that, but it wasn't like Media Row was full there. I saw Josh Gross there, but I don't see it's not like there's empty seats. It's not like the guy said, "Oh man, I need to work this weekend, so I better go cover another event." They just go, "Hey, the money train doesn't want me there. I'll be back in 2 weeks."
And I think it's fair, even as somebody who speaks for an outlet that generally is credentialed when it wants to be. That hasn't always been the case over the years. And Josh Gross, whom you saw this past weekend, is a lifetime exemption from that. But I think it's fair to say that, the pool of media that's there doesn't necessarily ask the most penetrating questions, but sometimes it isn't the penetrating questions necessarily, but the simple presence. And I'll throw back to a card that Jay and I covered down here in Houston. We watched the weigh-ins and we watched Antonio Arroyo fall flat on his face, stepping off the scale. When that happened, now he had made weight. He made weight, stepped off the scale, fell on his face. Yeah. The UFC has no ability to cover that up because 4 different outlets are live streaming this. If there's nobody in that room but a regulator, that coach and his corners, and a couple of UFC flacks, that gets covered up, and Arroyo walks out to fight the next night. Yeah. And something patently unsafe is happening because there are no independent eyes watching.
Yeah, I can personally attest to being a part of every single broadcast when that moment happened. Because you
yelled, "Holy shit," and all of a sudden you guessed it on MMA fighting, MMA junkie, Sure Dog.
And I don't mean to be disrespectful because I know the work that a lot of you guys put in is over. And you guys that's why I'm on with you guys. You guys are the guys that I appreciate the work you put in. It just seems the questions that get asked for a fan, when you dig in deep and you start looking stuff, obviously there's stuff written. I just
how is the training? Who do you want to fight next?
Or an insult at a fighter, or just the question, and I brought it up on the podcast with Ed. The question that I can't get over, and nobody asking Dana White, goes back to the Chimaev Diaz situation, where Jing Liang was able to fight Rodriguez at a 10-pound weight difference, but the commission in no way, no how was going to allow Diaz and Chimaev to fight at the same gap. And he sat up there and he used it as an excuse for changing the fight. Well, the commission will never let 2 guys who are that big of a gap fight each other. I heard that a half a dozen times. And not once did anybody say, well, wait a minute. I mean, and I shouldn't say that because maybe somebody did, but I didn't catch anybody ever saying, well, wait a minute, are you full of shit or are you full of shit? Because we know you're full of shit. It's just right there. How come you can't answer for that one? Or what are you going to change? It just leads to, I don't know. I understand that people don't want to lose their credentials. That's been a battle for 15 years now, but I feel like you gain a little bit of respect if you go, what the hell's going on? You know, I mean, we're seeing it with Tua right now in the football world. You talk about a guy collapsing. We saw it in the football world. We saw a guy do a chicken dance, do a face plant on a football field, and 4 days later get KO'd again and look like John Matua and UFC 6. I mean, I tried to explain to somebody, he became Chuck Liddell overnight. Like his chin, he lost his chin. He hit the back of his head in the same spot twice. First time, made him the chicken dance. Second time, sent him into a seizure. You know, you talk about media catching that, and obviously catching guys falling off the thing, but the sports world's just crazy. I mean, so I guess having media there really is helpful because you call out when you see that guy fall. I'd like to think we don't lose cameras for weigh-ins and stuff, but was there even weigh-in cameras for this one? I was so caught up in Bellator. So was it was a dark room? No. Okay. See, that's over the top. Even at least put your own cameras.
No. There were media was allowed to attend the weigh-ins.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
we do have that, but they were prohibited from attending the live event. However, according to new recent statutory regulatory changes, that might not be the case. That media is required to attend or must be allowed to attend. So that's
changes made quietly just within the last month or two.
Yeah.
To the Nevada statute.
To the effect of media will not necessarily be the UFC will not have to make space for media for weigh-ins, which then we go into the one championship territory, and we don't want to go into one championship territory. I have some thoughts on one championship. You see Superbon, a long-standing champion who has a history of not having to cut weight. You know, the whole tie, all that thing. Oh, they don't have the culture of weight cutting, whatever. Well, allegedly, he had so much difficulty cutting weight that he fell ill, and the champion fell out of a title fight on Prime, because you know we're doing so well on paying attention to these things. I don't want to get off that. Let's go back the other way.
Let this be a week that we don't talk about.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, let's move on to this and do a little bit of talking about the actual fights. I mean, it's what we're here for. We've been here for a half hour. We haven't actually talked about anybody punching each other in the face.
I love it.
That's not gonna change too much because we got to talk about the main events of UFC Fight Night 211 and Bellator 286. In some ways, they're about as different as can be. For the UFC, a kind of infamously thin card. Bellator, fairly loaded for its offerings this year. They took place on the same day. The UFC in an even more empty than usual Apex. Bellator in what was touted, at least over the broadcast, to be a packed Long Beach arena. Matt, of course, was there. The similarity, both of them had a 5-round main event that did not deliver on the promised action too well, to the point that the judges' decisions ended in a bit of controversy, I think just because there was so little offense and individual rounds ended up being difficult to score. Of course, the UFC, it was Mackenzie Dern versus Yan Xiaonan. Yan won by majority decision with one judge giving Dern a 10-8 round that turned into a draw.
Shout out to Mike Bell, man.
Shout out to Mike Bell.
I love Mike Bell.
If you look at the media scores on MMAdecisions.com, which not always accurate, but sometimes a good barometer, almost half of the professional observers ruled it either a draw or, in a couple of rare outside cases, a win for Dern. And then the Bellator main event, of course, Patricio Pitbull defending his title against Adam Borics. He won by unanimous decision, winning 5, 4, and 3 of the rounds on the 3 various judges' scorecards. But yeah, neither of these was a banger. Which was more of a letdown? And Matt, you were present at Bellator 286, correct?
Yes, I was. Yes.
What was the feel in the arena? Because to me, watching the broadcast, booing was audible throughout the main card. Anytime things got slow, like the crowd was letting them know. Did it feel like that in the arena?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, nowhere near a sellout arena. I love Bellator. I'm a Bellator stan. That was my 33rd Bellator event. So I go back to Bellator 10. I've been supporting their organization from the beginning. I've been stepped in the cage for photos a couple times. I mean, I've been close to Bellator. I made relationships with a couple of the workers around there that, is cool because it makes it fun for me as a fan to go and be able to text somebody who works behind the scenes and find out what's going on, some stuff. But anyways, arena was not full. Not a big arena. Long Beach Arena is an old dump in Long Beach. They held Bellator 106 there. That was the Tito Rampage card that fell apart, became Chandler Alvarez 2, which was a great fight. But it wasn't actually until I walked into the arena and I'm like having flashbacks. They also had Glory 52 there. So I was like trying to remember the layouts. And when I buy tickets, I'm pretty intricate as far as finding angles. And, I don't mess around with that kind of stuff. But ticket prices were way overpriced from the day they put them on. Posted them, didn't buy them until the night before, ended up catching a huge price drop, 200% price drop on tickets. So I was able to get a really awesome seat for a really fair price, which allows me still to support the organization, but not empty my bank account to do that. Not full. I would say, I don't know the exact let's say if 10,000 seats is the arena, I would say that the entire upper bowl probably had maybe 200 people in it. The second bowl was probably, by the time the McKee fight hit, it was probably 80% on the second bowl. But for up until the main card, it was 20%, 30% full. So I'm guessing that there was probably 4,500 people, 4,000 people maybe in the arena, which not big. I could be off by 1,000. Don't quote my numbers exactly, but not one of the smallest crowds I've seen in a while. The Forum, when they go there with like Cyborg, when they've gone there with Archuleta and Pitbull in the past, they usually do pretty well in those. By the time the main card hits, you're looking probably 9,000 people, which is probably with the stage. That's a really good Bellator gate. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the booing. I'm old school. Like I come from the school where you celebrate even if a guy gets knocked out. The guy's ball's bigger than I do, and he walked in there. I'm not going to be disrespectful. Plus, I know what it takes as somebody who at least tried to train to get in there, and I couldn't do it. So why in the world would I boo? I'm paying to watch these guys. I don't need to boo. It's not part of my world. I also don't like the stand-ups. You're watching mixed martial arts. If you boo when it starts to get mixed, you're watching something wrong. There was a BKFC show that all those people could have tuned into if they just wanted to watch fists fly and blood fly, which I watched too. So I'm into both, but I fairly uneducated crowd with the booing. I'm not a big fan of that. Late arriving, just not a great showing or not a great feel for the arena. Not a lot of energy. Now, some of the fights lent to that. You talk about the main event. I wanted to believe Borics had a shot at it, but it's Pitbull. We break into Pitbull's legacy, and you start talking about a dude. I think that was the 7th or 8th time I've seen him live, going back to like the I think 99. Bellator 99 might have been the first time I watched him fight. Cage side. The dude is the epitome of mixed martial arts. A Brazilian mixed martial artist too, like just to me everything that like makes me want to go to fights. So I love seeing him. I just feel like he's too good. And we're talking about a guy who's now clearing out like a second generation of fighters. I mean, he's kind of entering like the GSP level where it's like now we're gonna have to start doing stuff again. I cleared out I beat Hughes, I beat yada yada. Now I gotta beat Koscheck for a second time. Now, Hendricks wants me again. You know what I mean? Like, so I kind of feel like that's kind of where he's entering a world right now. I don't know where he goes. You mentioned something about bantamweight. I did not stay. I beat traffic to get the heck out of there. It's still 2 hours from my house. But, overall, the arena just wasn't the best atmosphere. Small crowd. Booing, too much booing for my taste, and the main event, like you said, it was so. But when I don't boo because I realize I'm watching like a special talent in there, and if you're getting a chance to watch that, again, I go to a lot, so maybe I'm spoiled, and it's not my once in a year trip, which I could understand some frustration if you're going there looking for blood and guts, but it's an all-time great fighter in there. I don't care what organization you're looking at, and I think you got to respect that a little bit. And then you got a kid in there who's 18-1, jumping into the deep end. You know, he had his big win over Pico, but when you get into in there with Patricio Pitbull, there's not many people on this planet that are more dangerous and harder to beat.
I do love that you mentioned GSP there, because the parallels are there to be had. One, the length of the reign at the top, where he's starting to do his second lap around the pool of contenders, but also once, like, GSP never stopped improving, and once he took a bad loss that he shouldn't have, things got really buttoned down. His fights were not always appointment viewing, but they were always greatness. And he just became a dude that, like, boo if you like, but I'm going to nullify everything this guy does that could possibly endanger me, and it's on him to adjust. So, yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. Like, once he got to the top, Jose Aldo's performances weren't always that incredible. For a guy that came to fame as just this lightning strike offensive weapon, he also kind of said to Uriah Faber, if I could beat you with nothing but leg kicks, well, damn it, I'm going to beat you with nothing but leg kicks. So I think unwarranted criticism. Like, I didn't love the fight, but I sure as shit wouldn't have been booing.
He has a lot to lose too. He lost that McKee fight, and I think he probably saw the dollar signs quickly start to evaporate.
Yes.
He was able to get that back, whether bad judge's decision or not, in a fairly close fight. He was able to get the title back. And I think that he knows he's so close to either maybe we get that crossover fight. I mean, maybe that's a dream, but
it's never happening.
It's not happening probably to us, but in his mind, he's thinking like, I can't be many more wins away from either that, or he sees how much Chandler's getting in Bellator or in the UFC. And he's going like, at some point, I'm going to ask Scott Coker to go, that I tell him I need to go make some 7-figure deals over in the UFC, because I beat Chandler. He's a division higher than me. He's making that money. I got Volkanovski out here who's going to start to run into the same problem Pitbull is running into the same problem as far as beating guys and creating rematches. I mean, that fight is there. It'd be beautiful if we could get a one-off. Obviously, that's pipe dream, but I think in his mind, there's so much to lose that you pull back. I think GSP thought the same thing. Like, I'm making so much money.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that ends this is if I lose. And if I can win boring and not get hurt, then why? I'm a prize fighter. I'm not an executioner. You know. So I that's the way I see it. But I do understand fans' frustration when you get billed this battle of violence and you get a little bit of a dance, or I don't want to say sparring, because you saw flying knees that could have easily taken his head off, that he was able to stay away from. But I just think when you have that greatness there, you don't boo it if you want to be considered a serious fan or somebody that knows the sport.
And fans really, I can't speak for you because I know you can do that yourself. But I don't know if fans felt like they got their money's worth in terms of action, in terms of smashing together, because Bellator is famously known. Grabaka Hitman Caposa on Twitter will post the prelim sacrifice hour, because the matchmaking is such that there's going to be ridiculous violence and everything's going on. Well, there were 4 finishes at Bellator 286, and 2 of them were gruesome injuries. So fight fans were like, "Yay, Lance Gibson triangling guy," and Myrtleizer pounding out some guy who just so happens to him all the time. Phil Hawes did that to him. So it's a tough situation for the fight fans that are just expecting, like, Bellator's not the number one organization, but there is a level of expectation that one has going to a Bellator fight card going, well, these prelims, if we're going to watch them, someone's going to get their face knocked off. And, there's going to be, it's just build for violence, and the matchmaking is doing so accordingly. Like, this is a promotion that just right now put a 4-0 hotshot against a woman that's 2-5. Oh yeah, the 4-0 girl already beat her in the amateur circuit. So it's not, we know what you're doing here. You're throwing together 5-0 Lance Gibson against a 15-12 Dom Clark. I know he's a short notice replacement, but my point still stands. Bellator did what it could, and this was the product that came its way. And it's really tough because I'm actually struggling with this question, and I want to ask you guys, and Ben, I'll ask you this first. I don't know between the UFC and Bellator if there was a real stock up, we overuse that, but a stock up performance where you look at this fighter and go, they are viewed better than they were before because of their winning performance, or the expectation was for them to lose. They performed better than I expected, and I have respect. I don't see many fighters that had a good weekend, and that's tough because half of them won. This isn't just a situation where it was a draws and no, this was Patricio Pitbull had a dominant win where I think I gave him 4 out of 5 rounds, and he did the incredible thing. To use a football term, coach for the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick, was famous for always taking the other team's best weapon away from them when he plays them. Like, there's a hot shot wideout. I will double cover them properly so that their best asset, their best path to victory, I'm not going to let them use it. Patricio Pitbull grabbed him Adam Borics mid-air when he did the prototypical I always throw this flying knee that Borics is famous for, and took that away from him and made him pay 3 separate times. The first time he almost Fedor Arlovski'd him, which was magical. I wish that had happened. But Pitbull had a brilliant performance. Scintillating, exciting, no, but he won, and he put further distance between himself and the pack. So, Duffy, did anybody really between all the fighters, like Yan Xiaonan or Chelsea Chandler maybe, or Weber Almeida? I'm just the fighters.
You have to go well down the card to find somebody that really did their stock some good. Chelsea Chandler was one of the names I was going to mention because she blasted a fighter that I reluctantly picked to beat her. She made 140 pounds with no apparent difficulty. So she's one, and Brendan Allen is the other, because Brendan Allen has been a little prone to flaky performances, but at his best, that's what he does. He just absolutely throttles very good fighters on the ground, just kind of like a young Luke Rockhold, where he looks like this long, lengthy striker, and it turns out his kicking and his grappling are the best parts of his game. North of that, no, not a lot of people distinguished themselves for outstanding performances that I could see. Just rough weekend for that. I do want to kind of, unless anyone else has some thoughts along those lines, I want to jump. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I from Bellator, I didn't see much of the UFC card. I enjoyed from the crowd the grappling exchanges between J.J. Wilson and Vladimir Tokov. I don't know how that came across on the TV.
They were fun.
I feel like both of those guys kind of, at least to the crowd in Long Beach, those guys both gained a little bit of respect because that was a fun fight. I felt like we saw a real mix of martial arts in that fight. Again, maybe it was a slow night and that jumped out at me, but I had people texting me going, wow, that was a fun round, or that was a fun fight for that fight specifically. So I think both of those guys didn't hurt their, they didn't, it was because it was a close decision and it was back and forth, but I enjoyed that one. So in my mind, I kind of look forward to watching both of those guys fight again. Not that I didn't want to be for the event, but they didn't turn me off to them. The other one who lost, and I know he lost 30-26, and I know it's something we might get to later, but Spike Carlyle, I don't feel like he dropped in stock to me. To me, he showed up and was fighting a guy that he knew was above him. And he'll never say that, but that's the way I felt. And that's the way I want to see fighters go at it. I mean, that dude went in there and said, fuck it. I'm going to throw blows. I'm going to gas out in a round and a quarter. But Jesus, I'm going to I can't beat this guy if we fight for 20 rounds. I can't beat him if we fight for 3. Yeah. But I can beat him if I come at him like a goddamn tornado. And and again, on TV it's different. In the crowd, I'm getting reactions to people losing balance as opposed to being hit. So there's certain things. But that's as a fight fan, you talk about the fans in Long Beach. There was that first round of that fight had people on their feet. And even when the bell rung after the fight, it was a standing ovation. And I get it was McKee's hometown, but it wasn't his greatest showing ever. So he didn't necessarily earn that thing. I felt like that fight was a little bit carried by Spike Carlyle. And I didn't have it as 30-26. I almost felt like he won the second round. Or maybe the first round it was.
I gave him the first round.
I thought he won the first round. So I'm sitting there going, as we're getting into like the last minute of the fight, I'm kind of going, well, if Carlyle reverses this, which he did, and he might have even ended up on top, if I remember right, as the bell rang. It was real close. There was some back and forth at the end. But did he lose? Did he lose bad on the cards in the history books? Yes. But I felt like, dude, like, I'll watch you fight anytime you want to fight. If you're going to go in there and fight like that, then I don't care if you fight a sumo wrestler in Ryzen. I'm going to watch you. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I want to watch from a guy. I don't want to watch him go in there, be timid and get his ass kicked and tap out in 2.5 minutes, like a lot of dudes do when they go in there and they're instantly realize that, I think reality's got to set in with some of these guys. Again, I'm not a fighter. The mentality's got to be, you got to beat everybody. But when you fight a guy who's like the number one prospect under 26 or whatever the heck his age is now, like, and he's been a killer and he's beat people and former champ, I give all respect to Spike Carlyle. So I feel like his stock kind of went up despite getting cut up and beat and losing that decision.
Well, he should be recovered from those cuts in time to fight Baruto Kaito on New Year's Eve in Japan. So
there you go. I am down for that.
Old school open weight throwback. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
One fighter that we already discussed briefly and, had a performance that drew mixed reactions, your UFC main event winner, Yan Xiaonan. Did she do enough, gentlemen? She did enough to win, in at least the eyes of two of the judges. She did enough to snap the first 2-fight losing streak of her career. Did she do enough to establish or reestablish herself as a viable strawweight title contender in the UFC? Whoever wants to go first.
I guess I'll hop on this one because I was on play-by-play for Sure Dog at the time. I don't think so. In fact, I think it's weird because she went up against a true specialist. There are like 8 of them left in the sport, in the high levels of, I am really good at this and I'm not so good at anything else. I mean, watch her overhand right into a level change. Well, I mean, what was my stat of the week? 11% about her landing takedowns. Even like Spike Carlyle has a higher takedown percentage rate, and he is a crazy person. But Yan Xiaonan, she survived the worst of it. She survived the bad exchanges. She did what women have been doing to Mackenzie Dern lately, like Tisha Torres, like Marina Rodriguez, getting into these really ugly spots and being like, wait, just don't panic. Don't give up a limb. If she's got the body triangle, don't just be like, it's done. Because fighters do like, I mean, Hawk, what you were saying about like getting in there, being timid and tapping out in 2.5 minutes because, oh, I'm done. She fought her well enough to be able to beat the specialist, but she didn't outclass her in any way besides maybe on the feet. Not really. Like, she did fine. Like, I think that's a problem when you're the headliner, when you're the big show in town, when the company is constantly bombarding social media with Mackenzie Dern pictures saying this is the person that the card is built around. And you kind of get by her, and the UFC's like, huh? And fans are like, huh? And people were like, well, that kind of should have been a draw. Which, by the way, I actually, on retrospect and post review, I should have scored that fight a draw. I should have given a 10-8 fifth round to Mackenzie Dern to make that a draw, and that's bad for Yan Xiaonan, who is trying to establish herself as a top flight talent that can challenge the best of them. She's going to get a bigger fight because she won the last fight against a top 5 name. Just knowing what's going to happen. Do you really want to see her fight Jessica Andrade? Do you really think that she could turn it around against Marina Rodriguez over 5 rounds? I mean, Weili Zhang, I don't think that fight is going to happen. I don't know their whole situation. I know they're not training together at China Top Team. Rose Namajunas is probably the next fight. And we know what Carla Esparza can do to her. So she's in a real ugly situation right now that makes you go, no, I don't think you're ready for, you're a top 10 fighter that's going to, like, she is almost like a gatekeeper to the top 5. And that's a bad place to be in this division.
Yeah, I didn't get to see the whole fight. I saw the last 2 rounds on my phone in the arena. Everything I saw was Dern dominating, so I assumed she was going to win the decision based off what I witnessed. And then obviously that wasn't the case. The earlier couple rounds of the fight apparently didn't look like what I saw for the last, round and a half or so. But I don't know. I mean, she lost 2 out of her last 3 fights. I feel like she was basically put in there as for showcase for Dern to submit and move on. It would be nice to see the UFC maybe take a step back with her actually and just go, hey, let's get you like on a winning streak before we feed you to Weili or Carla again, who already beat you, or Rose, who, if we're talking standing, I can't imagine she's going to be able to, Rose is probably going to pick her apart if her head's right. I would like to see him pull back a little bit, even get back into the, I don't know. We saw just Angela Hill win. How about an Angela Hill rematch? I something like that. Something like that. Let's just get you back on a streak, because the way that fight ended didn't look great, and you still lost 2 out of your last 3. So, like, we don't need to derail your career too much with a terrible loss.
And unfortunately and ironically, I think that's what would have happened if we'd had the draw here. Yeah. She would have gotten a lateral or slightly downward move. Well, hell, if she'd lost, I don't think she loses her job. The UFC is desperate for a Chinese star, desperate for a Chinese champ. 3 losses are not a guaranteed pink slip like they were even 5 years ago. And she would have gotten an Angela Hill type, maybe like a Michelle Watterson type. But instead, she won. Technically, she can't take too much of a step back. And Dern's going to get a needed breather, and Jan's going to go up into the meat grinder that kind of is that mosh pit of the 5 current and former champs that have basically held on to the title and been this hermetically sealed bubble forever. Like, she and Marina Rodriguez are the 2 that are going to kind of puncture that first. And in her case, I do not think it will be good for her health.
Yeah, I mean, what Hawk touched on is very important. She's 33 and she's a sort of a new wave of Chinese talent. Hasn't procured a finish yet, but another bad loss would pretty much shut the door, especially to a top name. Like, getting finished by Carla Esparza, who can't even finish a sandwich, is a really difficult thing to run into. If you go up and fight Rose and get head kicked in the 2nd round or something, that's it. Like, you can't, it's that moment of, I can't break into the top level. And that's a really bad place to be. That you don't want to have that. You want to, I like what Matt said, like, to throw her against, like, I don't know, like maybe even like an Amanda Lemos type, a top 10 also needs an extra boost of that kind of something, because then otherwise you're going to have to go down far. And I don't think that's fair.
I mean, yeah, I feel like the winner of the championship fight anyway is probably, we know how it goes. They're probably not going to be turning around and defending the title in the next 3 months or anything like that anyway. Yeah. It's still another month off. Get her a fight, and then maybe if she gets a win over another, even if it's a top 15, anybody, 10 to 15 ranker. What was Dern going into this fight? Was she in the top 5? She was 5. So maybe we look at the 5 to 8 range then, and try to drop her in somewhere. Just get a parallel fight, and then win that, and then let the chips fall in the top 5 there, and then get a top 5 opponent. If you get that win, then you can't really be denied. But I just think that, like, we're too quick to throw people to the meat grinder and just process them out, and then they're done. And then
I got one. Teacher Torres.
There you go.
At the very least, I think it'd be a more fun fight than some of what else would be in the offing. And if none of these things have immediate title implications, then give me the person in the same general rankings range that's more likely to give me a fun fight. Yeah, I'm all for that. Yeah. Let's do one more general question about these 2 cards before we jump into the fun stuff. I want to keep us somewhat on schedule. I don't want Ant to come back and be like, "How'd you have an hour and 45-minute show?" No. Okay. One of the more noteworthy, newsworthy things that happened in either of these events had to do with Aaron Pico. in his fight with Jeremy Kennedy. Clearly something happened to his left arm or shoulder somewhere in the first half of the first round. You could tell he started favoring it to the point of like cradling it with the other arm, like physically. Like anytime you're looking at your own limb to give yourself visual input on what your nerve endings are telling you, that's not a good sign. And this is happening while, you know, Kennedy has him in a body lock and he's basically doing like a dead overhook, just, you know, with the arm there. Turns out at the end of the round, and he did survive to the end of the round, really gutted it out, defending himself from like back control and rear naked choke attempts with one working arm, makes it to the bell. And I'm not an orthopedist. If I were, I wouldn't be his orthopedist, but that shit was at the very least dislocated. You could see the little divot. I've had dislocated shoulders. I know what they look like, even if I don't have deltoids quite like those of Mr. Pico. The controversy comes from what happens next. His main corner second, Brandon Gibson. His name isn't on the door, but he's as much a part of Jackson Wink over the last 15 years as Jackson or Wink. He's been there forever. He's the last guy in the building that Cowboy Cerrone would talk to. Basically does an impromptu separated shoulder adjustment on him. Pulls it out, pulls it in, does 30 seconds of work that just has me cringing and shriveling in my shorts to watch it happen, because I know how it must have felt, even as full of endorphins as he must have been. Basically fixes it to Pico's satisfaction, but not to the satisfaction of the referee. Was it Mark Smith?
Blake Grice.
Blake Grice, thank you. Blake Grice, taking time off from his busy duties as the lead singer of Clutch to... Sorry, he looks exactly like Neil Fallon. So Grice calls in the cageside doctor. Cageside doctors, you can hear him over the mic. As soon as he walks in the cage, I don't like how this looks. Tells Pico to raise his arm over his head. Pico is unable to do so, but it's like, I'm fine. About 30 seconds later, the fight is called off. That's my lengthy play-by-play for it. My question is, what do you make of the whole situation, specifically his corner's reaction and attempted solution to it?
I want to know what...
yeah, if you're about to ask Matt for his, like, how well did you understand what was going on?
Exactly.
Matt?
That's exactly what I was going to ask him.
Okay, so I take a lot of photos during the fight, so I'm kind of zoned in. I have my camera viewer, so I'm picking up. I generally pick up on cuts and stuff in the crowd quicker than the people around me. So I started commenting that he's looking at his shoulder. He seems to be peeking over. Something just didn't look right, and obviously you can look at the big screens in the arena and see that too. But I'm really focused in on certain shots or angles that I'm trying to get for pictures. So I'm seeing that stuff. I didn't realize, other than like, okay, maybe he's got a stinger. Like, I couldn't tell it was out of the socket. All I thought was like, wow, Jeremy Kennedy is like, no friggin' joke. Like this is not what I expected. I expected and Pico's another guy. Like, I've seen him. I think this was the 7th time I've seen him fight. Like, I've seen his whole goddamn career in front of me, and I've seen him get laid out. But usually you're like just sitting there waiting for that fireworks shot where you're like, dude, that guy's rattling on the floor now because Pico just got a hold of his guts, you know, with a liver shot or something. And so I didn't know that. When it ended, all of a sudden you could see the minute he stood up off the ground and you could see it like slumbered down a little bit. Yeah. I knew, like, okay, it's dislocated. I don't know if you want me to keep going, but like basically I saw the move on the corner. I'm not a doctor. Like, that's what they do in movies. Is that how you're supposed to rip it back in? I don't know. I've also remember old Stallone movies where he bangs it on a wall or something. Like, I don't know how it's done. But I mean, I can get into like, it's kind of weird because I don't want to sound like a psychopath who thinks we should have a guy out there with an arm hanging from his side. But also we watch a blood sport in a cage with two guys basically trying to kill each other. So like, let's drop the moral standing here. If the dude wants to keep fighting, I'm a little bit confused on the stoppage. That's where because does he have to be able to raise his arm over his head? Like, can you defend yourself without raising your arm over your head? We saw Faber, classic WEC fight against Mike Brown, break both hands and throw elbows for 3 or 4 rounds. So, like, we've seen dudes, you know, with broken everything keep going. So, again, I don't want to sound nuts, but I think that's kind of where I'm going with it is I don't know the referee can stop it, the doctor can stop it, but if the fighter wants to continue, I don't think raising your hand over your head should be the issue. If he had a torn labrum, would he have been able to continue? So that's kind of where I'm a little bit confused on who decides whether it keeps going. I know it's the ref and the doctor, but in that moment there, when we've seen other stuff go on, broken noses, broken jaws, everything else be allowed to continue.
Jay, thoughts?
I have a couple thoughts on this. I'm a little less just bleed on this particular situation than Mr. Hawk. This isn't Warrior. Like, you remember that MMA movie where he busts I think that situation actually happened where he came out there with one hand and was kind of, flopping around and fighting back with the other one. Protect yourself at all times is a very important part of this. And of course, I took the referee and judge training course, and I believe the first thing that we were told during the referee course is that fighter safety is the number one priority, period, the end. There's nothing that can trump it when it comes to that, and protecting the fighter from permanent harm, or not being able to defend themselves properly in a fight. That's the referee's duty to do something. I felt a little funny. I don't want to criticize Blake Grice because, of course, I wasn't standing there, and I'm not a certified, or I'm not a actual practicing referee. But if I had seen that, I probably would have waved it off without having to call in the doctor, on the knowledge of fighter can't raise his arm above 90-degree angle with himself. What happens when the first head kick comes at him and he's unable to defend himself? He is now at a disadvantage because of an injury that suffered during the fight. I feel like permanent damage can come to him. In addition, what Six Gun Gibson did in the corner, I'm not a doctor, but that was insane. That is how you shred everything and rip everything and break things. That's, maybe we should hit up like an MD. I don't know who's still doing it anymore. The guy that we used to have is no longer.
Reach out. I'll get you a connection for Dr. John Lucas. He's the head medical doctor for the South Carolina Athletic Commission, and he's actually a member of the Athletic Commission now. Comes on my show all the time, and he can break it down for you.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Or just to break it down in general, that's not how you do any of that, Mr. Gibson. That's not fix. It didn't fix anything. It exacerbated things. And then the doctor immediately said, that's a broken clavicle, which, it doesn't get fixed by pulling on the socket. It didn't take much. It didn't take a lot. It didn't seem like, it seemed like a no-brainer to me. I can't think of many fights where I've seen a fighter having his arm slumped by his side and it continues for a while. There was a UFC fight that happened, and the fighter, she broke her arm. I forget who it was, but she broke her arm and it was kind of hanging right here. And then they called at the end of the round for some reason.
Victoria Leonardo.
I think it was Fury, and that was a tough situation. But it was a very clear, hey, I can't move my arm anymore, so that's all over. Pico couldn't defend himself, and he was at risk for further damage and permanent harm. So any justification of a Josh Thompson in the world to say he should have been able to keep fighting doesn't work for me. It doesn't, and I mean, I don't mean to poo-poo on what you said, Hawk, but it doesn't work to let him fight because it's a blood sport, or because we're they're already trying to bash each other's brains in, because there has to be some level, there has to be some threshold that
I tend to agree with you, not because I'm not really like trying to say it from like what I would do. If I was Pico's corner, I'm stopping that fight. I got a potential lottery ticket right here, and I'm going to stop it. I'm just talking about the general procedures. Like we've seen serious injuries be allowed to continue. Mm-hmm. Jokingly, you talk about him not being able to block his head. We're talking about the promotion that allowed a dude with no arm to fight. So Nick
Newell assumes the risk.
but and again, like I said, without sounding like a psychopath, because I would have stopped the fight if I'm his corner. I just wonder where the referee and the doctor, because like if that fight's in the UFC and that's Conor McGregor, he's allowed to go out there and try to fight with his arm hanging off the side. Like they're not going to stop that. Like if I hate to say it, but like we're going to see what happens if your arm's dislocated, you try to fight. If it was a big enough fight. This was a Pico fight, which means something, but Bellator has a lot more to gain by him taking that L and coming back in 6 months or 8 months or maybe even a year now after God knows what damage is in that shoulder. Yeah. But it's more the process for me that I'm just that I question. I wouldn't have sat on the thing and said, God damn it, he needs to be out there. I would have went, well, what I'd like to hear the doctor's reasoning for it, because is it the same as a broken jaw? Is it the same as an eye? Can't see out of an eye. We see guys go out there and half of their eyes closed. And old school days, let's stop the fight. New school days with money on the line, it's like, well, yeah, let's whisper in the referee's ear and let him know that if he gets hit 15 more times, you can stop it. But as long as he's, you know what I mean? Like, so that's my question there is like just the process behind it, because we've seen more gruesome stuff. Yeah. I mean, cut wise and I mean, I feel like I've seen dudes with like their jaw, like Arlovsky and Rumble. Remember that fight happened in
He lost his whole bottom of his
World
teeth.
Series of fighting, and Arlovsky's jaw was hanging down, and I got to be going like, dude, like this dude's fighting.
Devin Clark had his teeth smashed in. Yeah.
I mean,
it's not fun,
and so I don't know.
Duffy, I'm actually really curious because you were, running the show at the time. A couple things. I mean, I know we're way over time, but that's okay. I'm having a lot of fun right now. First of all, what the hell, Aaron Pico's corner? You're a bunch of sport killers. Aren't you supposed to look out for your fighters? Obviously, I'm riffing on the Jackson Wink thing. But where was any sense in the world? Duffy, talk me on or off a ledge here. What? I don't know. What the hell?
Regardless of what you think of the doctor's decision, the corner's responsibility,
oh my gosh,
first of all, is to protect their fighter. You cannot trust the fighter to make that decision.
No.
That fighter has, like, we can't even relate to it. We all work regular jobs of some kind where we show up to work every day. We have daily goals. We have weekly goals. We have monthly goals. Professional fighters basically spend 4 months testing for a final exam that they get to take about 3 times a year at best. Everything they've done for 4 months has led up to this one moment, a literal just pass-fail test. And they're full of adrenaline. Everything in their mind, everything in their heart is screaming at them, yeah, I'll fight the overweight opponent. I don't give a shit. I'm here. He's 2 pounds heavy. Who cares? Because if I say no, all my work's out the window. And if it's the UFC, they might cut me. Yeah, I got a cut. I don't care. I want to keep fighting. Because otherwise I'm going to spend the next 4 months stewing about this and not having my win bonus. You can't possibly trust a concussed, endorphin-like drenched fighter to make a smart decision, even for their own future in that moment. It is on the corner to be the voice of reason. They were not the voice of reason. They, at best, they might not have made, like Brandon Gibson might not have made things worse on that shoulder, arm, collarbone. At worst, maybe he did. Yeah, I thought it was atrocious. That's it. Like your job is to protect his health to the extent possible in this pursuit, and a certain amount of risk comes with it. But you added risk instead of taking it away. Not okay. Not good.
I just can't help thinking if Chael Sonnen would have survived another 30 seconds, what they would have done with John Jones' toe.
That toe. It was a compound fracture.
Winkle jaw. I know. I just that team. I can only imagine them trying to pull on the toe.
Cover it up and
just give me some tape.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. That's it. It was a wild one. You know what? Let's just move on to the greatest titled segment in all of media. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. For those familiar, we're going to talk about what actually surprised us or ironically did not surprise us about the week in mixed martial arts news, combat sports news. What surprised you the most about UFC Vegas 61, Bellator 286, one on Prime Video 2, BKFC 30? Any news from the past 2 weeks could be related to pre-fight coverage, fights themselves, or what happened after. Matt, our guest, do you have anything for us this week?
The one card, Angela Lee fight. Never
He
thought.
stole mine right out the gate.
Never thought I would be against Pride scoring in my entire life. But if that's the thing, I think it was a close fight. But I thought she squeezed out. I think if you win the next 4, she dropped her with an elbow. Like I think she caught up enough to make up for that first round. So the overall fight scoring kind of threw me off there. Not much on the UFC. Ben Rothwell, BKFC.
Hey! Don't take too many
Okay,
spots.
I won't take them all then. I'll leave it with that then.
Don't take them all.
Go ahead then, Jay.
And he managed not to steal mine, so you're good to go, Jay.
All I have to say is, he did it. He did it. He did it. He did it. I can't think of a better match, and I say this, riffing on BKFC signing older aging fighters that are already shop worn, already head traumaed, and you're adding more to that with ungloved fists and of course, tissue paper faces that cut even easier with bare fists. But my goodness, Ben Rothwell getting in there, walking out with his cape. By the way, remember that was a big sticking point with Ben Rothwell and Reebok. They would not allow him to walk out wearing his cape because he wanted to wear his cape, and they banned him from doing it. Well, son of a gun, Ben Rothwell wore his cape out to the walkout to his BKFC 30 co-headliner against Bobo, the Bible Belt Brawler O'Bannon. That's a lot of B's. And everything, it was the stars aligning moment. He was the biggest stock up of everybody that competed this whole week. Was Ben Rothwell. He gets up there within 7 seconds. Bobo O'Bannon's on the ground and done. 7 seconds. Bobo hits the ground. Ben Rothwell walks away. Bobo can't get up. Fight's over. And Ben Rothwell gets up there and delivers the post-fight interview he's been wanting to deliver and ends it. Bless you, Ben Rothwell. I am so happy you're part of the sport in any way. And I am not surprised, Mr. Falcons, that Ben Rothwell is my MVP of the fight weekend.
Outstanding. I love it. My I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment for the week also comes from one I'm Prime Video too, and it also comes from Angela Lee, who in the wake of the fight and in the wake of the controversy where one CEO, Chatri Sityatong, said that he felt that Lee had won the fight and that Xiong should not have been awarded the decision. Xiong went off at the post-fight presser saying that one has always played favorites for Angela Lee and that she, was insulted and all this and that. And a one championship official scoring card actually made the rounds on social media. So now we know what it looks like. And I'm not trying to be mean, but the only thing that could make it worse is if it were done in crayon. But no, my I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment is Angela Lee saying that one championship ought to review their rules and standards. Because irony and lack of self-examination, Angela Lee is thy name. She, in a promotion that just dips into shady territory a lot of the time and seems to almost exclusively works in unregulated areas and seems to try to massage results to the ends that they want as much as they could possibly get away with, which is a lot. The Lee family in general and Angela Lee in particular are the poster children. She is the #1 beneficiary of one championship's rule set and obvious patent favoritism. I just jaw dropping. The suplex non-call. There may not be fire, but there's a hell of a lot of smoke about the closed weigh-ins and her not even trying to make weight, blowing weight by full weight classes and just people being given the carrot and or stick to shut up about it. For her, of all people, to come out and say, well, I think one championship just really needs to clarify its rule set. I'm not sure whether I'm surprised or not, but I know that I am just, you can't see it because I got headphones on, but I'm just shitting out my ear holes right now. I just cannot believe it. All right. That's it for the week that was. For the week that is, we have no UFC card for the second time in 3 weeks. That's the last break of this kind that we're going to get from the UFC until the end of year break. There's no Bellator for 3 more weeks. There's when is the PFL finals? That's Black Friday. Okay, there. So yeah, no one championship for a little while. No major MMA. Matt Hawkins, what are you going to do with yourself on this free weekend?
Whew. Watch football on Sunday. There'll be something. I'll look up Grabaka Hitman on Twitter and find his combat schedule and find something to go to. But I don't mind a weekend off. I've always been like the less it can be more kind of guy when it comes to the fights. I say that until there's a weekend off, and then I'm like, geez, I wish I could watch a bunch of no names fight in an empty arena. But yeah, just chill, save money on gas, and and just get through the weekend. The following weekend, obviously, for me is a BKFC event that I'm going to look forward to. I'm a big fan of Mike Richmond in BKFC, going back to his Bellator days. So he fights for a title on the 15th. So that's kind of what I'll start to look forward to getting to there. But yeah, I don't mind a weekend off. Doesn't affect me anymore like it used to.
I am glad to hear it. You're just relaxing, letting it chill just a little bit. Jay Petrie, what are you going to do with this free weekend? And you're not allowed to say work on the Sherdog Fight Finder. All right, and Jay's goal will be inbox 0 by the end of night Sunday.
That is my goal today, and that is exactly my goal for Sunday. There is Cage Warriors going to Italy.
Send me any and all Spanish cards. I'll take them.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, just literally just Spain. I don't want the Mexico or Peru.
No,
I'm kidding.
I got one from Barcelona for you.
Yeah. Kick me any Spanish language cards. I can blow through them pretty quick.
Okay.
And for me, I weekend off, I actually will get to work on one of the more long form franchises that are my true labor of love at Sherdog, either a new entry to the Hall of Fucking Awesome or maybe another season of Tough Redrafted. I've been taking the Tough season since Tough 1 and redrafting those fighters in order of how they actually did on the show and for the rest of their careers. And I need to stay at least 6 or 7 years behind the seasons. Otherwise it's, too recent to get a real read on them. But I think the Rose Namajunas season is up next. So I might get that one done this week. We'll take a look.
That's not bad.
That's about it for us for this jumbo size episode of the Living Death Show. Thank you very much to Matt Hawkins for joining us. This is the second time. I have had an absolute blast both times. We hope to have you on again. And go ahead.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Any fans that want to check out my other show with Ed Carbajal, check us out at Combat Hour on Twitter and Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on YouTube, Spotify, all the platforms. So check that out if you need another show other than this to keep you entertained especially over the slow week coming up.
There will be links in the description, and you will be tagged on the social media posts. And, of course, as always, thank you to my good friend Jay Petrie for joining me on this Monday.
Always, man. It's I feel better. Actually, I'm really, really happy that you were able to join us today, Hawk. Not just because Ant or whatever, but yeah, this was a good thing. When we didn't even have to talk about fights for like 45 minutes to be able to still talk about fights, that's a groove moment there. So I hope the audience enjoys it as much as I did.
Hey, perfect on a Bellator and Inoki week. It was a perfect time to have Matt on, but he is more than welcome anytime. Thank you all for watching, and I will not even try to do Ant's tagline. Talk to you next week.